Barney Frank sat down for an interview with Slate, and he's certainly not feeling the burn. So after brushing aside Bernie Sanders' chances, he said the following: Bernie Sanders has been in Congress for 25 years with little to show for it in terms of his accomplishments, and that's because of the role he stakes out. It is harder to get things done in the American political system than a lot of people realize. And what happens is they blame the people in office for the system. And that's the same with the Tea Party. It's, I voted for these Republicans. We have a Republican Congress. We voted for them. They took over Congress. They didn't accomplish anything. Okay, so what he's doing is he's comparing Bernie Sanders to a left-wing Tea Party, essentially. He's like, yeah, this guy's so extreme and he's so far out there and nobody wants to work with him and he doesn't get anything done. And that's the problem, is that Bernie Sanders is an extremist. He's kind of like the Tea Party. He's got little to show for his entire time in Congress. Well, that's fundamentally untrue, number one, and I'll get to that in a second. But number two, if there indeed was a left-wing Tea Party equivalent, I would say that those people are right about stuff. But that shows you where Barney Frank lies, where his sympathies lie, when it comes to politics in general and where he falls on the spectrum. In his mind, it's like, what, you don't want to play ball? Like, you don't want to be involved in this system that we set up? You don't want to make friends with other sellout lawmakers and cut backroom deals? And that's exactly right in terms of who Barney Frank is. Because for those of you who don't know, obviously, it was him and Dodd-Frank. It's Barney Frank and Chris Dodd, whose names were on the Wall Street regulation that happened after the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. Guys, that piece of legislation is a joke. It's window dressing reform, window dressing regulation. There are some good things in there, but basically what happened is you have this reform that does nothing to address the fundamental problem that's in the system. And there's so many loopholes in there that the big banks and Wall Street went right back to doing what they were doing beforehand. They reinflated the bubble. And then there's going to be another crash soon. And then everybody's going to turn around and point at Barney Frank and Chris Dodd and President Obama and the Democrats and go, see, regulation was the problem anyway. Get rid of all the regulation. When in reality, this regulation was just window dressing. It was reform in name only so they can put a check mark in the box of historic reform when it didn't really do anything. So they appeased their Wall Street donors while pretending like they did a decent job and saying to the American people, see, we were tough on them. But then when it crashes again, obviously, is going to be, there's a potential now of turning hard right because you didn't fix the problem. Your regulation was bullshit regulation, and now people are just going to blame regulation. So I despise Barney Frank, if you can't tell. Okay, and his point about Bernie Sanders, he didn't get anything accomplished. That's the problem, is he's so extreme. No, when you get stuff accomplished, it's because you and Republicans have both sold out. So you're doing the bidding of your donors. So I don't want those things accomplished. But when you have Bernie Sanders accomplishing things, I want those things accomplished because he's principled. And furthermore, he's willing to work with more libertarian-leaning Republicans, for example. How many times have we discussed an Alan Grayson-Ron Paul alliance from back in the day when Ron Paul was obviously still there? Like, that's what happens. You have principled progressives get together with principled libertarians, and they work for something on social issues, for example. So what did Bernie Sanders accomplish, in his political career? Well, let's take a look. From 1994 until 2006, who's successfully put more amendments into bigger bills than anybody else? Bernie Sanders. Number one in amendments. And he was the progressive amendment king. So, just to give you some examples here, but we can go on all day. He did a corporate crime accountability amendment. He did an amendment that saves money for colleges and taxpayers. He held the IRS accountable and protected pensions. He expanded free health clinics. He actually did that with Republican support, too. He got tough on child labor. He increased funding for heating for the poor. He fought corporate welfare and he protected against nuclear disasters. He did a greening of the U.S. government amendment. He did restricting the bailout to protect U.S. workers with one of the bailouts. He helped veterans' kids. He exposed corruption in the military-industrial complex. He did support for treating autism in military health care. Again, the list goes on and on. Number one in amendments from 1994 until 2006, and across the board, they were progressive and they were rational. And again, we haven't even touched other things. Bills that he proposed that got slapped down, which is no fault of his own. It's the fault of the fucking corrupt, backwards-ass Congress. But of course, Barney Frank would blame him. Why are you proposing reasonable stuff like single-payer health care, damn it? Don't you know you got to play ball and sell out to industry like the rest of us? That's not a problem with Bernie. It's a problem with you, Barney Frank. So there it is. He does get stuff accomplished. He did get stuff accomplished. He got stuff accomplished at every step of his legislative career. And Barney Frank just doesn't agree with it because here's a guy who's principled. He's truly progressive. He hasn't sold out. And perhaps somewhere in the back of Barney Frank's mind, he looks at that and he goes, damn it, maybe I should have been the person who didn't sell out and who was a true progressive and who was principled and who actually made a name for himself. That's a legacy that's worth talking about long after Bernie Sanders is gone. Instead, Barney Frank staked out the role of the traditional Wall Street Democrat, and he goes on to do apologetics later for Hillary fundraising. If that's the kind of Democrat you want to be, by all means, be that kind of Democrat, but you're not going to get our respect. You're not going to get progressives who fight for you, and certainly you're not going to be remembered after your death because you're just another run-of-the-mill sellout Democrat, not a principled Democrat like Bernie Sanders.